For more on this meeting, we're joined now by Guy Saint-Jacques. He's a former Canadian ambassador to China and a fellow at the China Institute at the University of Alberta. Today, though, he's in Montreal. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Mrs. Johnston.
So China's President Xi Jinping will spend 3 days in Russia with Vladimir Putin. We've started to see some of these images of Xi coming off the airplane, for example. What does Xi stand to gain from this visit, though?
Well, I think that I see this as a show of support for Russia, and also there is a message for the rest of the world, especially for developing countries, because Xi hopes that it will rally more support from developing countries. And when you look at the assistance that has been provided by China through the Belt and Road Initiative and through development assistance in general, they have been able to get a lot of support in international organizations. What is also interesting to note is that in the letter that Xi Jinping published in the Pravda and other Russian papers prior to his arrival, he says that China and Russia are committed to safeguarding the UN-centered international system, the international order, underpinned by international law and the UN Charter principles. And when you look at what's happening in Ukraine, obviously, it's totally against these principles, but obviously it's in the interest of Xi Jinping to help Putin to win in Ukraine. And I would not expect a surprise during the visit that maybe Putin will declare a unilateral ceasefire in Ukraine.
Is there anything else that China is getting out of this? Of course, for weeks now, we've been talking about this possibility. Will China arm Russia? Will it help Russia on the battlefield? China has dismissed those accusations and warnings, saying that that is not going to be happening. It's also claimed its neutrality. And we've been talking this morning about this proposed peace plan that we saw last month. All of this trip happening under this banner of peace. So what do you see China's role in all of this being in terms of where the war is going to go from here?
Well, I think first that China has been surprised that Russia could not win the war as quickly as it had forecasted at the outset. In terms of being impartial, it's very difficult for Xi to pretend that when you know that this meeting is in fact the 40th that he has had with Putin since he came to power just over 10 years ago. What China is gaining is, in fact, getting more secure access to natural resources. In the last year, it has increased its imports of oil from Russia by 40%, of natural gas by 100%. More coal is coming. We will certainly see an announcement on the building of another gas pipeline. More collaboration in space and in nuclear cooperation, especially for the building of nuclear reactors. And also, let's not forget that China needs the support of Russia in case it invades Taiwan. It will need some arms from Russia, but also its political support. So we can see here, despite the fact that, again, in its letter, it's an open letter, Xi says that there's no alliance between the two countries. In fact, their interests are aligned against the United States and I would say against the Western world, and they are trying to promote this multipolar world. But Xi has a lot at stake here, because if we were to discover that China is supplying arms through intermediary, and that could be Iran or Belarus, because the president of these two countries were in Beijing recently, well, then that would create a huge backlash in Europe and in the United States.
I also want to get your thoughts on that arrest warrant that was issued last week for Putin by the International Criminal Court. Xi is going to be the first world leader to meet with Putin since that, the first world leader to shake his hand of a wanted war criminal. So what does this tell us about the credibility then of that announcement from the ICC?
Well, it's another demonstration that China looks at the international order, at international law, as if it were a menu. We'll take this, we won't take that. In fact, Xi has said that this indictment reflects double standards, and therefore he has dismissed this indictment against Putin. And so it's just another demonstration that we will have to continue to put pressure on China to respect international rules, to abide by international court decision. But it's a clear show of support for Putin in these circumstances.
Also want to get your thoughts on how the Ukrainians fit into all of this, because it is unclear at this point if any meetings with Ukrainian officials are planned or even proposed at this point. We've heard from Ukraine's foreign ministry this morning, earlier today, saying that it does expect Xi to put some pressure, to use its influence on Moscow to do what it can to try and bring about peace. But what do you think is actually going to happen here? Do you think that Xi should meet with President Zelensky as well?
Well, if it were a serious peace plan that China put forward, it should have, the President Xi should have spoken with President Zelensky in February, at the end of February, when this came out. And the fact that he has not done that, in my view, again, shows his clear support for Russia. But let's assume that during this visit, Putin announced a unilateral ceasefire. I think then she would want to phone Zelensky to say, look, the Russians are making some concession. It's time for you to compromise. But the compromise in Xi's mind is that Russia would continue to occupy the eastern part of Ukraine, which is something that is totally unacceptable to Ukraine. So, in fact, China is the only country probably that can put pressure on Russia. It should have done that at the outset of the conflict. And now, in my view, it can only be perceived as an interested party and not really as a peacemaker.
For today, we are going to leave it there. Of course, we're going to be keeping a close eye on Moscow today and over the next couple of days to see how all of this plays out. But for now, thank you so much. We do appreciate your perspective on all of this. Of course, as a former Canadian ambassador to China yourself, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.